Thank you for joining us. I am Toke Aidt, the director of the Keynes Fund in Cambridge, and my guest today is Dr. Julia Shvets. We're here to talk about your new Keynes Fund project, Private Provision of Public Goods and Group Dynamics, the case of COVID-19 asymptomatic testing. What is your research question?
Before I talk about that, I want to point out that you, Toke, are wearing two hats here. One is the director of the Keynes Fund, and the other is a co-investigator on this project. In this video, though, we have a division of labor where Toke is asking me questions and I'm answering them, but this is our joint work. So what is our research question? We ask how social norms of behavior evolve within groups. We see in many situations, be it at work, at university, or in other social settings, that some groups of people develop nice and helpful attitudes, whilst other groups have selfish behavior that comes to dominate. We try to understand why and how this process happens. We do this in a specific context. Last October, in a bid to contain the spread of COVID-19, the University of Cambridge launched an unprecedented program in which it asked most of the students to take a weekly COVID test. As we all know, COVID is asymptomatic in many people, so without this kind of testing, it would be hard to identify the infected students. The participation was strictly voluntary and mostly just relied on students' desire to help limit the spread of infection in Cambridge. Over 15,000 students were eligible, and within a few months after the launch, 60% of them were taking the test. This is a very high average rate. At the same time, this also implies a large variance in participation. A key feature of the Cambridge program is that the students are grouped into small households based on shared facilities, kitchens, etc. These households were also student bubbles during the lockdown, and so typically there are strong social interactions within the student households. The question we're after is whether and how these groups affected the individual students' decisions to take part in testing, and whether we can trace emergence of social norms within households. To answer these questions, we're currently analyzing the detailed anonymized data kindly shared with us by the medical team of the program.
What are you looking at that hasn't been addressed before?
First, social norm formation in groups is poorly understood. Be it social norms about not chewing with your mouth open, not taking bribes, or this is an important case we're interested in, social norms about helping others. Theoretically, one possibility, of course, is that different groups arrive at different social norms because they comprise of different individuals. But theory also predicts that similar groups might come sometimes to different equilibria. Good equilibria or bad equilibria. This is a fascinating possibility, which also suggests there is potential for improving outcomes for those groups stuck in a bad equilibrium. But the question of how to achieve this improvement can only be answered if we understand more about how different groups might arrive at these different equilibria. Second, testing for COVID is what economists would call voluntary public good provision. It's a public good in the sense that the society at large is the main beneficiary of someone's decision to test. But the inconvenience of doing so, having to stick a swab up your nose every week, potentially facing the risk of self-isolation, even if you're asymptomatic, is borne by the student. Voluntary contributions to such public goods are widely documented, but the mechanism behind them are not very well understood, particularly in groups. There are lots of laboratory studies, but field evidence is more scarce, and what field evidence we do have does not always square well with the lab evidence or the theories.
How is your research innovative?
The right data to study social norms and multiple equilibria are very difficult to obtain. There are two unique features of the data associated with the Cambridge's asymptomatic testing program. First is that social groups are very well defined as households, and their members and characteristics are known to us, the researchers. This is rarely the case. Second, we have repeated observations over time on students' decisions to test, or in other words, on contributions to this public good, which allows us to ask questions about multiple equilibria and social norm formation.
What wider social issues do your research address?
The big question we're after is first, why different social norms evolved in different communities, student groups, neighborhoods, workplaces? And second, what role group dynamics plays in promoting socially helpful behavior? The big policy question in the background is, what can we do to promote socially helpful behavior among individuals? We hope that the lessons we learn from Cambridge's very successful program and the findings of this research might inform the design of other programs in the future.
One of the objectives of the Keynes Fund is to strengthen the research base in Cambridge and help younger researchers establish themselves. How does your project do that?
Our study is cross-disciplinary. It has been a pleasure to collaborate with our medical colleagues and very humbling to watch them launch and run this program. Also, we have been involving postgraduate and undergraduate students in this research. This is important for building research capacity among our students.